What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today we're going to be taking you guys through each of the tower bosses here in Palworld with the kind of HP that they have, the attacks that they have, as well as some of the best pals that I used to go through these the quickest. Some of them are early game, and then once you get those end game pals, you can blow through some of those early on towers. But let me tell you, that 4th and 5th tower are definitely decently challenging to get through. Gotta be almost max level, so we will get right into it with this first tower. Alright, so the first tower that we are going into is located at a 111 negative 433. This is Zoe and Grizzbolt. For me, I personally suggest being around level 15. You could be a little bit lower than that and still get away with this one, but level 15 will make it way easier for you using the bows that you will have at that point in the game. Definitely will make it a little bit better to go through compared to just trying to walk up and hit that Grizzbolt. Now, the gameplay that I have in all of these is from my level 50 account, so just take that into account. I'm just trying to show you what kind of attacks that they have as well, but definitely for this first one with the Zoe and Grizzbolt, level 15 is what I suggest. HP for this duo is 30,550, with it only having electric attacks. So this means that we are going to be using ground pals on this first boss. Now, there are a couple different options that you can use early game that have some good attacks, like Fox Sparks, where you can pick it up, turn it into a flamethrower. Early game, that thing absolutely melts. I know it isn't a ground pal to give that super effective damage against Grizzbolt, but it'll still do a lot of great damage. Now, some of the other pals that you can have is Dumond. That one is that little Quagsire looking pal that is a fish or a tadpole coming out of the dirt. We got Folder, which looks like our nice little ferret that's digging around. This thing will be a good early game pal, as well as Rushor. All three of those are pretty easy early game pals to just go around and catch. Now, we do have two pals that you can catch with later on, but you can also breed them out a little bit earlier in the game with some pals that we can catch pretty early, making this specifically one of the best pals to have for all of the bases. Talking about Anubis, this is that nice ground pal that can, when you catch the alpha version of it, comes with Emperor of the Ground, gives us a 20% increase to that grounded damage. But regardless of having that, if you have like a musclehead ferocious Anubis, it absolutely kills the first couple 3 gyms or towers, I should say, for Palworld. Very easy to breed, like I said, early game. Couple different options that you can go through. Pen King and Bushy is definitely the easiest to go out and catch. There are 2 alpha pals that are around 15 level 20 for both of these, so you can get them very early and breed out this Anubis for some of that later game very easily. There's also a bunch of different other combinations. They will take some of the later game pals, but something like that Pen King and Bushy or a Cellray and Relaxosaurus, the combination of those two will give you Anubis, and you are able to crush the first couple towers. Now, the other pal that I am going to cover real quick for this first tower is Digtos. This one right here is a pretty mid-game level, around 15 to 25. You can find these out in the wild. You can find some even higher around in those higher end-game areas like the wildlife refuges, but you can also breed this one out with something like a lamb ball and a beacon, or like a Captivia and a beacon, something like that. That is a pretty early game pal to get. Same thing with Chick Pie and Hellzeifer, Lipmunk and Relaxosaurus. All of these give out Digtos, so you can craft one of these, breed it as well, just like Anubis. Go to those first couple towers and absolutely wipe out these enemies. Now, when we move on to the second tower, it is in a cold region, so you got to be aware of that, but it is located at 182 30 for the location. I would suggest being about level 25 for this one. Don't want to be too much lower than that, because even the second one does take a nice jump up for difficulty. Its HP is 69,375 with Lily and Lyleen. It'll have mostly grass attacks with a few water attacks. Now, the way that these towers work once they get higher up is they definitely, those pals that you're fighting, the boss pals, will have moves that counteract your pals that are most effective. So like this one, since it is a grass pal that we're facing, we want to go in with fire pals that are the best to use. Now, like I said, it will have those water attacks, so some of those fire pals will be able to be killed very quickly depending on those attacks that it shoots out. If it's using mostly its grass attacks, you will be fine, but you got to watch out for those water attacks. So first off, some of the pals that we can use, like I talked about in our first one, Fox Parks is a very good pal to have for this situation. Has very good move with taking it as the flamethrower. So if that thing is level 25, 30, you go in there, you're able to absolutely melt that Lyleen with that pal and its move. Now we do have a couple others that you can get early on, like Ruby. Like I said, that one is a very good pal that we use to breed out, but it is also a very good fire pal to have. We have Bushy on the other side of that. Like I said, can get it in its alpha version at one of those shrine locations. It is a very good pal to have for a lot of different things. Breeding as well as its attack power is pretty high on the list. Next off, we're going to have Orserk. This is a pretty mid-game pal, just like it was for Digtos in our ground pals. You can find it in a bunch of different areas, leveling from about 15 to 30 around the map, so you can go grab one of these for your fire side and get to that second tower. Now there is one pal that you can craft pretty early on, which is Blaze Howl. This thing is very good to have around your base. It has 3 in that kindling, but it is also one of the most powerful fire pals that you can get in the game. You get this by breeding out a Ruby with a Relaxosaurus. That is your definite easiest options that you have for early game, with maybe a Tansy as well as that Hellzeifer to go with it. Another option you can do to craft this out, but that second base and tower fire pals definitely the way to go. Or, like I said, with that Anubis, since it turns your attacks to ground attacks, it does melt through that grass as well. Just makes you a little bit more powerful. And its attacks in general, Anubis is like top 5, in my opinion, for endgame even. So having one early is good for both the first and the second towers, as well as that third one, if I'm being honest. But like I said, with all those fire pals, definitely very good, with Blaze Howl probably being the best one that you can grab, with that Ruby and Relaxosaurus breeding it out. Now this is when the big jump happens from Tower 2 to 3. Now 3 and 4 are also very similar in HP for their boss pals, but for Tower 3 we are going to be located at -588, -518 with Axel and Orserk. So Orserk is a dragon as well as a lightning electric pal, so we have a couple different options that we can go into with fighting this boss combo. But I will say that this third one located in that fire region, so you will have to be wary of your armor you have on so you don't get hot. But this is where it really starts to kind of ramp up and become pretty hard, because I would suggest being at about level 40, if not even a little bit higher for this third tower, just because of how much HP they have, which is 130,700. So that Orserk is crazy strong, has a lot of health, and like I said before, its attacks aren't just gonna be dragon and electric. Of course it wouldn't be, just because for this one, ice and ground pals are definitely the pals that do the best. So that means that Orserk will have a grass move, one dragon move, and then the rest are electric. So that does take into account of kind of how you want to play this one out. So since this one is about level 40, like I said, for going into your level as well as your pals for taking this boss on, I'm not really worried worried about giving you guys too many of those early game pals, because at this point you'll be able to get those end game pals. Nothing really is out there that is higher than about level 45, unless it is one of those lucky pals roaming around. They can drop at 50. So this one right here for our pals, ground and ice, like I said, Anubis, easily the best one for this, because it turns, like I said, your attacks into ground attacks as well. So it's going to be doing some extra crazy damage on the electric side of this Orserk. So we are just absolutely eating its health. You can see in the background gameplay, this Orserk is getting absolutely mapped by my Anubis, doing a lot of damage per attack. It is a maxed out Anubis, so take that into mind, but this is definitely my favorite pal to take into this boss fight. Now, there is an ice and ground pal that is also very good with Reptaro Christ. This is that ice version of our Reptaro, so it has ground as well as ice attacks. We'll be able to negate, basically, or I should say it won't negate it, but it'll help with lowering the blow of its attacks on the grass side of things, because grass is powerful against that ground. So it is very nice to have that as a backup, with Reptaro Crisp being our second, with a couple others that are very good to have. Wampo, which is that nice giant old looking abominable snowman. Also pure ice, so it'll do a damage on the dragon side of Orserk instead of electric like our ground pals. We also have Mammorest Christ. This is one of the strongest ice pals in general. Same with the Wampos and Reptaro Christ. All of them are some of the top 15 pals for attack in combat in general. So definitely very good pals. With the last one that you could choose is that Dictos, again, just because it is a very good ground pal. You can get it early, plus it has good attacks on it to really help out with the battle, especially when you're going in some of those big AoE attacks. What I like to do, get out of the way of them personally, and also pull in my pal really quick, especially if it is one of those big AoE attacks that hurts my certain type, like the grass attack on this Orserk. If it was attacking one of my ground pals, I would try to pull it out real quick and then throw it out when that attack is done, just to save a little bit of health. But this is, like I said, when it starts to get pretty challenging. Moving on to boss number 4. It is located at 557-335, which is Marcus and Faleris. So this is a nice flying fire pal that is a pretty beefy tank with just a little bit more health than our Tower 3 at 146,975. So it only went up about 16,000 from Tower 3. That's why I said they are very similar in your battle style. So I would be about level 45 for this one as well. Nothing too much lower will be able to get you through this, especially because of the attacks that this pal has. Being a fire pal, you want to go in with those water pals because they do a lot of damage on this boss. But the problem is that this Faleris has a bunch of different attacks, which is mostly fire, so we don't got to worry about that. But it does have a good amount of electric attacks as well as a ground attack, so it plays a bunch of different of the weaknesses that we are going into with these water pals. So don't be too hasty when you are going in. Like I said, if it's going through one of those big electric attacks on one of your water pals, try to pull it back and put it back in its sphere really quick so you don't get hit by that nice 600, 800, 1,000 damage on your pal, which can be a big hit on them, especially in these last two towers. So I would try to avoid that. But we are going to be using water pals, like I said, for this. Or again, I will throw Anubis on this one as well as my 5th tower, just because, like I said, top 5 pals overall for damage and combat. I love Anubis. It is one of the best pals to have, and it just does one of the most damages you can do. Now, for the pals that I would throw in here for the water type, we got Jormuntide as our first option, water dragon, so it has a good little bit of options there with some pretty strong attacks, especially if you get that Alpha Pal version of it. Comes with Emperor of the Sea, so you can breed that down to all of these pals. Gives us that nice 20% increased damage to water attacks, which makes it a lot easier to go through that Tower 4. Now the second pal I'm going to go through is the Suzaka Aqua. This is that nice little pal that we get in the end game from breeding out one of those fire Suzakas from up in the right hand corner where this one is to this tower. You can find a bunch of these Suzakas, so you just got to breed down to the Aqua version of it, and it does slap really hard. We do have a couple different options with Relaxosaurus as well as Afridian Aqua. Both of these are very good pals that have some pretty beefy water attacks on them. They are higher up in the combat pool for pals, so they are also good options, especially if you're just throwing them out for a second to let something like your Jormuntide or your Suzuki Aqua or your Anubis get some of that health back when it's getting attacked by that nice juicy Faleris. So we have a bunch of different options. Any water pal really works, but like I said, Jormuntide, Aqua, Suzaka is definitely the best. Anubis is up there as well, just because it's so beefy and it turns your attacks into ground, which just helps do more damage in general, even if it's not against something like an electric pal where it's doing that extra crit. And last but certainly not least, we got Tower 5 up here in the ice section. Make sure you're prepared for the cold. It is at negative 148, 447. Definitely would suggest being at level 50 for this, as well as your pals. Going up against Victor and Shadowbeak. This Shadowbeak has so many different attacks. It is crazy what it can do, because there's nothing really that can stop it, because it has attacks that help in those damage categories against you. Plus it has over 200,000 health at 200,700 of that HP, so this thing is beefy. Now, saying that, this pal has a bunch of ice attacks, a good amount of dark attacks, as well as a normal attack that is a huge side beam that will do a lot of damage to you specifically. Not as much on the pal side of things, because neutral doesn't stack damage on any other type, but it is insane how much of the attacks that this thing has going around the base. It's not just sitting there throwing a couple darks attacks at you. This thing is dropping everything on you, from big gigantic beams in the dark as well as that normal version, a bunch of dark attacks at you where they explode. The giant icicle gets thrown at you, so this last tower boss is easily the hardest, but we do have some tips and tricks in here to help you get through it. So since we're going up against a lot of ice, dark, and normal attacks, with Shadowbeak being dark itself, we are going to need pals that have a bunch of high damaging dragon attacks. So the first choice obviously is that Jetragon, one of the best damage pals in general for anything in the game, especially that dragon attacks that it has. Huge HP pool that it'll also have, so Jetragon, definitely one of the best to start out with this battle. We also have Orserk from our last boss battle, but we're going to be using him this time. Very, very good pal to have out there. It is that dragon electric, like I said, so when you got the dragon moves put on that Orserk, throwing it out, it's maxed out with its stars as well as the pal souls that you used before to level it up. It will do a good amount of damage with those dragon attacks. Kind of on the same page, we got Jormuntide, which we just talked about in the last one as well. It is water and dragon, so kind of the same thing as that Orserk. It'll be able to put out a good amount of damage when you have those dragon attacks selected instead of its water. Now, we do also in this category have Jormuntide Ignis, the same exact thing as the Jormuntide, just it's going to be fire and dragon instead of water and dragon, so just make sure you have those moves maxed out for the dragon attack instead of the fire. Throw that bad boy out there. With the last one, and maybe the best one for this fight, being Asagon. This thing is a dark and dragon type, so it'll help negate some of those dark attacks that this bad boy is throwing at us, because Shadowbeak is absolutely disgusting, but it is a very juicy HP pal with Asagon, and it has good strong dragon attacks, so you can throw it out there. It'll do a good amount of damage for this boss, but like I said, it is a very challenging boss. Make sure to use that that technique of when you see one of those big strong attacks, especially since it's using a bunch of ice attacks to hurt our dragon pals, when it's doing that big icicle attack, try to pull in your pal so it doesn't get hit for like half of its health from one single shot of this thing. Throw it back out, let it continue its attack. Another thing is, in the end game here with this tower and tower 4, your pals will get hungry very, very quickly and their sanity will drop fast. So you got to make sure to continuously feed them from whatever you have. They will eat naturally out of the feedback, but if you want to keep that sanity up even higher, make sure to throw on those salads and just eat them consistently even during the battle, because they will just stop attacking if their sanity goes down to a certain point, which in this one you do have to do as much damage as you can, as fast as you can, because it is slapping out very hard and there is a lot of HP to go through. So hopefully this helped you guys out with the locations, the amount of HP that you're going to have to cut out of this thing, the attacks it kind of throws at you, as well as pals that you should be using to go through these and maximize your efficiency with attacks and defense on these tower bosses. So thank you guys again for all that continued support. Lots of content coming out here with Destiny, and hopefully the new raid for Palworld coming out soon. So if you like the content, don't be afraid to like and subscribe. Hit that bell if you haven't, so you get the notifications for when I drop all of these videos here for Palworld, as well as for my Destiny content. So again, I truly appreciate all you guys. I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.